You know that feeling when Christmas is supposed to be this warm, cozy dream? The kind where the snow falls gently, making everything look like a picture postcard, and the air smells like roast turkey and pumpkin pie? Yeah, that was the scene, but inside at my family's dinner table, the warmth felt suffocating. It was like I was trapped in a beautiful cage, and the bars were getting tighter. I'm Jason, 29. For years, I've been the family's black sheep. It wasn't just a role, it felt like a brand, etched into me, getting deeper with every passing year. Lately, though, it had become unbearable. I don't know when all shifted, but over the last few months, every single thing I did seemed to just piss off my family. No matter how hard I tried to connect, to make things right, they found new ways to make me feel like I was unwanted, like I didn't even belong there. Look, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but damn, I didn't expect to be treated like an outcast in my own home. And then there was Kyle, my brother, the golden child. He was the one who always did everything perfectly, never messed up, always had that blinding smile. My parents? They ate it up. He could do no wrong in their eyes. Kyle was the kind of guy who could just walk into a room, and suddenly everyone would gravitate towards him, treating him like some kind of messiah. And me? I was just not. I tried to keep things civil over the years. I really did, but the distance between us just grew into a chasm. He'd make these snide comments, sometimes subtle enough to sting, sometimes so blunt they felt like a slap. Every single time, it hurt. This Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. I told myself, Jason, don't let it get to you. It's Christmas. But the moment I stepped through the door, I knew nothing was going to be normal. Mom was in the kitchen, cooking like always. She didn't even look up when I said hello. Dad was in his favorite chair, buried in the newspaper, giving me that polite, almost dismissive nod. It was like they were pretending I wasn't really there, not truly part of their family. And Kyle? Oh, he had that smirk. That damn smirk that always made my blood boil. It happened after dinner when we were all sitting around, picking a dessert. It started innocently enough, just casual banter, the usual holiday chatter. I actually started to relax a little. Maybe, just maybe, this year will be different. But then, Kyle leaned back in his chair, that smug grin plastered across his face, and looked straight at me. Hey, Jason, he said, his voice dripping with this sickeningly fake sweetness. We had a vote. I just raised an eyebrow. A vote? What are you talking about? Oh, you weren't here last week, he continued, still smirking. So, we had a family vote about you. A knot twisted in my stomach. Instantly, my heart started hammering. What vote? I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady, but it was practically a whisper. Kyle looked around the table, like he was the ringleader, like everyone was hanging on his every word. We voted, he announced, his voice a chilling mix of amusement and outright cruelty, and you're no longer part of the family. Then they laughed. Everyone. My parents, they chuckled along, their eyes carefully avoiding mine. It felt like a sick, twisted joke, but the cold dread washing over me told me it was real. It was happening, right in front of me. My heart sank, heavy and cold. For a moment, I couldn't process anything. The room seemed to shrink, the voices blurring into an unbearable din. The laughter, that was the worst part. It felt like they were all in on it, and I was the only one who hadn't gotten the punchline. I want to shout, to scream, to make them stop, but something inside me just froze. Instead, I nodded. I just nodded. What else was there to do? Well, that's nice, I said, my voice barely audible. The tension in the room thickened. Kyle's grin didn't falter, not for a second. You should have been here for the vote, Jason, he gloated. It was unanimous, you know. Everyone agreed. You're just not one of us anymore. He actually looked over at Mom and Dad for approval, and they both gave him a little nod like proud parents. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something, but I didn't. I just stood up from the table. Jason, Mom said, her voice a little shaky, like maybe she was starting to wonder if this had gone too far, or maybe just if it was a joke that wasn't landing right. I didn't answer. I just walked away from the table, past the faces of people I had once called family. I could feel their eyes on my back, burning into me, but I didn't turn around. My hand was shaking as I grabbed my coat and pulled it on. I heard Kyle call after me, but I kept going. I just didn't care anymore. As I reached the front door, Dad's voice stopped me. "Jason," he said low and commanding. "You're not really going to leave, are you?" I paused, my fingers gripping the doorknob. I looked over my shoulder. "You voted, didn't you?" My voice was steady now, surprisingly calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "Well, I'm just honoring the vote." I opened the door and stepped out into the biting cold. The winter air cut through me like a knife. The door slammed shut behind me with a sickening thud, and for a second, I just stood there in the snow, lost, unsure what to do. My breath plumed visible in the cold, and everything felt so surreal. How had it come to this? How had they all turned against me like this? I started walking away from the house, from the laughter, from the suffocating pain. I didn't look back, but then something shifted inside me. I'd been kicked out, sure, but I wasn't going to just let this go. I wasn't going to let them treat me like I didn't matter, like I was some disposable thing they could just vote out and forget. No, I wasn't going to take that. I would make them realize what they had done. The next few days passed in a haze. I moved through life, but I wasn't really feeling it. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, mostly from my parents, a few from friends who'd somehow found out. I ignored every single one. They could try to apologize, to explain, but nothing would change the sting of that night. I didn't want to deal with any of it. Not right away. But the anger? Oh, the anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, a slow, burning fire. It wasn't just the insult of being kicked out of the family that hurt. It was the culmination of years of being ignored, belittled, and completely disregarded. Years of being the one left out of family decisions, the one treated like a problem instead of a person. But now they had crossed a line, a massive, unforgivable line. I spent a few days with my close friend, Tyler. He'd always been there for me. He let me vent, let me rage, but he also gave me a much-needed reality check. "Look, man," he said one evening, as we sat on his couch, the TV muted, "you can't just let them get away with this, but you have to do it the right way. You can't just storm in and start yelling, or you'll be giving them exactly what they want." It stung to hear the truth, but I knew Tyler was right. If I just lashed out, it would give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool, of confirming their narrative that I was the angry, problematic one. If I wanted to show them how serious I was, I had to play it smart. I had to play it cold. Over the next few weeks, I started formulating a plan. I wasn't going to burn bridges, at least not yet, but I would make them realize just how much I'd been undervalued. The first thing I did was stop reaching out. No more calls, no more messages. I didn't even bother to answer when they called. I wanted them to feel my absence. I wanted them to experience what it felt like to be ignored, to be treated like I was nothing. Next, I took control of what I still had. I started building a small, but incredibly effective network of people who actually cared about me. Tyler was my rock, of course, but there were a few other close friends and even some distant relatives who had always been more supportive than my immediate family. I gathered them for dinners, game nights, outings. It was such a stark contrast to the cold, isolated feeling I'd grown accustomed to in my own family gatherings. And I posted about it, too. Nothing flashy, just casual photos of me laughing, genuinely laughing with friends, enjoying life without the constant tension of my family's judgment. To anyone else, it was just normal social media. But to them, to my family, it was a message. Then came the moment I've been waiting for. My parents invited me to a family meeting. The text arrived on a random Wednesday afternoon. My heart did a strange little skip when I read it, but I didn't even think twice. I responded with a simple, "I'm not interested." They tried again, calling me, but I just let it ring out. By then, I had a much bigger plan forming. A few days later, Kyle reached out. I wasn't sure how he got my new number, but there it was, his name flashing on my screen. I didn't answer. After a few missed calls, he sent a message. "We need to talk. You're being childish." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. If only he knew what I was actually up to. But instead of responding directly, I texted back coolly, "I'm busy." For the first time in years, I felt truly in control. I wasn't just reacting to their treatment anymore. I was making them react to me. The real kicker came a week later. Kyle, in all his smug glory, posted a picture of the whole family at a dinner. There they were, all sitting together, laughing as if nothing had changed, posing for the camera, wearing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. It was one of those perfect social media photos where everything looks fine, but you can tell something is deeply, fundamentally off. I stared at that picture for a long time, a strange sense of calm washing over me. They'd made their move. Now it was my turn. The very next day, I set up a meeting with a local lawyer, someone I knew through a friend. I didn't need to launch a full-blown legal case just yet, but I was preparing for the long game. It was crystal clear to me now. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them forget about me. I needed leverage. I needed to make sure they knew they couldn't just erase me from the family without consequences. 2 weeks later, the Christmas incident was still fresh. But I wasn't done. I arranged a family dinner, hosting it myself. It took some careful planning, and I kept it low-key, but I invited everyone: mom, dad, Kyle, even some extended family. At first, it felt weird being the one to reach out, but I was playing a bigger game now. It wasn't about patching things up. No, it was about getting the last word. The night arrived. When everyone gathered around my table, I could see the surprise in their eyes. Kyle was the first to speak, predictably. "This is unexpected," he said, his eyes narrowed, trying to figure out my angle. "What do you want?" I just smiled, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "Just thought we could have a decent meal together." The tension was palpable as we sat down, but I felt the weight of the situation not as a burden, but as power. I wasn't sure what they expected, but I wasn't backing down. I was finally the one in control. We started eating, an awkward silence filling the room, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware. And then something unexpected happened. Kyle stood up, glass in hand. "To family," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, a mocking glint in his eye. I knew this was the moment to strike. It was time for them to see the true cost of what they had done. "I think you've had enough," I said calmly, raising my own glass. Kyle looked confused. My parents did too. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice laced with annoyance. "You wanted to vote me out," I said slowly, carefully, watching their faces. "Well, I'm making my own decisions now." I stood up, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt the power shift decisively in my favor. Kyle's smug smirk faltered just for a second as I looked directly at him. "The vote was clear, right? I'm no longer part of the family," I said, my voice cold, devoid of any emotion. The silence that followed was deafening, but I wasn't finished yet. I had one last thing to say, one final move, and that's when the doorbell rang. It echoed through the sudden silence of the room, sharp and sudden, like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Eyes darted between each other, trying to figure out what was going on. I hadn't planned for anyone else to show up, or so they thought. My gaze drifted to Kyle, whose smirk had completely evaporated. His face, once so confident, was now etched with utter confusion and a hint of fear. I walked over to the door slowly, deliberately, savoring the sense of control I hadn't felt in so long. As I opened it, the face that greeted me wasn't a relative or friend. It was someone they hadn't expected. It was my lawyer. For a split second, there was a collective gasp. My parents' faces morphed from confusion to dawning anger, but they said nothing. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads, try to comprehend. Kyle, always the first to speak, finally managed to stammer, Who is this? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped aside, allowing the lawyer to enter the room, giving him a subtle nod. He walked in, briefcase in hand, his expression calm and utterly professional. He wasted no time with pleasantries, walking straight to the table and looking directly at my parents. "Good evening," he said, his voice clear and authoritative. "I'm here on behalf of Jason. I believe you may remember him." My father's face reddened, but it was Kyle who spoke up first, trying to mask his discomfort with sarcasm. "I don't know what this is about, but if you think we're just going to—" Actually, the lawyer interrupted smoothly, cutting him off mid-sentence. "I'm here to serve you all with this." He calmly handed my mother a thick envelope. She hesitated, staring at it as if it might bite her, before reluctantly accepting it. My father sat up straighter, tension radiating from every fiber of his being. He must have known. He had that look of someone who had just realized they were about to lose control. "What's going on?" my mom finally asked, her voice trembling. "I'm simply here to ensure that everyone is on the same page," the lawyer said, his tone unwavering. "This is a legal notice. As of today, Jason has filed formal documentation to terminate his connection with your family's estate and any future claims or entitlements associated with it." The room went absolutely silent. The atmosphere shifted like a sudden thunderstorm had rolled in, the weight of everything that had happened finally sinking in. I could feel the tension building, an almost suffocating pressure in the air. They were all staring at me, shock evident on their faces. "You're kidding," Kyle said, his voice strained as he tried, unsuccessfully, to hide the panic creeping into his tone. "You can't do this." "Actually, he can," the lawyer stated smoothly, his eyes never leaving my family. "This is just the beginning. You see, there are some other documents in this envelope that pertain to other family matters. But the main point is clear. Jason has made his decision, and I'm here to ensure that everyone involved understands the legal ramifications." My mother was the first to open the envelope, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She skimmed over the paperwork, her face paling with every line she read. The others were trying to hide their growing panic, but it was obvious they were starting to realize just how serious I was. "You can't just cut us out of your life like this," my father said, his voice softer now, more pleading. He finally stood up from the table and took a step toward me, but I held my ground. The years of neglect and control had built up inside me, and I wasn't about to back down now. "I'm not cutting you out, Dad," I said slowly, my voice still steady, unwavering. "I'm just making sure you know that I won't be treated like nothing anymore. I won't let you and Kyle manipulate me or treat me like I'm disposable. That vote you had, it doesn't count. I made my decision. I'm out, and I'm making sure you can't do anything about it." Kyle clenched his fists, his face contorted. "You're being dramatic. This is ridiculous." But even as he spoke, I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. He wasn't used to being on the other side of the table, to seeing the power shift away from him. "No," I said, my voice firm. "This is reality. You wanted to vote me out, remember? You thought I'd just roll over and take it. But no, I'm taking control now. I'm done being the punchline in your jokes, the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong. I've got a life to live, and it's not with you." The lawyer turned to leave, his business completed. But before he could exit, my mother finally spoke up again, her voice shaky but louder now. "What do you want from us? Why now? Why do this to us? Why?" I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "Because for years, you treated me like I didn't matter. You thought I would always be here, picking up the pieces when things went wrong. But that's not how this works. You want me to be part of your family? You want to pretend like nothing happened? Fine, but there's a cost. You don't get to toss me aside and then expect me to come crawling back." I paused, letting my words sink in, watching them squirm. Kyle, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted in his seat, clearly losing his nerve. I've moved on, I added quietly, and I'm not going to beg for a place at your table anymore. The room fell silent once more. The tension was almost unbearable. My parents were staring at me as if they couldn't recognize their own child. Kyle's face was a mixture of disbelief and raw frustration, his eyes darting around as if looking for a way out. I stood there, my body tense, but my heart felt strangely, wonderfully calm. I wasn't the person they had tried to force into submission anymore. I had done it. I had made the decision. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. I turned to the lawyer, nodding toward the door. "Thanks for coming," I said. He gave a short, knowing nod in return and exited, leaving the crushing weight of the moment behind him. And with that, the silence became overwhelming. My parents looked utterly defeated. Kyle was seething, and the rest of the family, who had been quietly observing from the edges of the room, shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say or do. I took a deep breath. This wasn't the end, not exactly, but it was a definitive turning point. The ball was in their court now. The question was whether they would finally realize the consequences of their actions or continue down the same toxic path. As I stood there, looking at them, I knew that I had taken the first real step toward my freedom. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. My parents just stared at the documents, as if they could somehow wish them out of existence. Kyle's face was twisted with disbelief, like he was trying to figure out how the power had slipped from his hands. The rest of the family, those who had gone along with the joke, who had laughed as they voted me out, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly unsure where they stood. Then my mother did what she always did when she felt cornered. She tried to manipulate me. "Honey," she said softly, folding her hands together as if she were the victim here. "Let's not be hasty. We're family. You can't just walk away from us over a joke." I let out a harsh breath that was almost a laugh. "A joke," I repeated, shaking my head. "That's funny, Mom, because it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like the moment you all finally said out loud what you've been thinking for years, that I don't belong here." "That's not true," she insisted, but there was no conviction in her voice. It was hollow. "You don't get to decide that anymore," I said, cutting through her weak protest. "For years, I've let you all treat me like an outsider in my own family. I let Kyle walk all over me. I let Dad ignore me unless he needed something. And I let you guilt trip me into staying, even when I knew I deserved better. But that ends today." Kyle scoffed, rolling his eyes. "So what? You're just going to cut off your family forever over this?" His voice dripped with condescension, but I could see the cracks forming in his bravado. He wasn't in control anymore, and he absolutely hated it. I met his gaze head on. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I'm doing." My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up, a desperate edge in his voice. "You think you can just erase us? Family is family. You'll come crawling back one day." He said it like a fact, like it was inevitable, like he was stating the law of gravity. But he didn't know me at all. I took a deep breath, letting their words bounce off me, no longer capable of piercing my shield. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the final confirmation that I was making the right choice. "I won't," I said, my voice steady solid. "You made sure of that. You all decided I wasn't part of this family before I ever made this decision. I'm just making it official." I turned toward the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. My lawyer had already left, but he had done his part. The paperwork was filed, and soon I would be legally free from any financial or familial obligations to them. No inheritance ties, no legal claims, nothing. Just freedom. Kyle, finally realizing that I was absolutely serious, stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair with a clatter. "You're a coward," he spat, his face red with rage. "You think you're better than us? You'll fail on your own. You'll come crawling back, begging for help." I turned back, looking him dead in the eye. "If cutting out toxicity makes me a coward, then fine," I said, a faint, genuine smile touching my lips. But at least I'm free. Enjoy your little kingdom, Kyle. I hope it was worth losing a brother. With that, I walked out the door. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. At first, my parents tried to call, then text, then send emails. Each message shifted between fake concern and outright anger. I ignored every single one. Kyle, predictably, tried a different tactic. He sent messages taunting me, trying to get a rise out of me, trying to provoke me. I didn't respond. Then, even his messages stopped altogether. A month later, I heard through a mutual friend that Kyle was struggling. Without me around to take the blame for everything, the cracks in the family dynamic were starting to show. My parents had started putting pressure on him instead, expecting him to pick up the slack now that I was gone. It turned out that being the golden child wasn't so golden when there was no scapegoat left. As for me, I moved forward. I got an apartment in a new city, started focusing on my own life, and surrounded myself with people who actually cared about me, people who uplifted me. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, deeply happy. Because I wasn't just free from them. I was finally completely free.